Hello guys, welcome to Corpus. So today we will solve a question which was asked in American Express. Before looking into the question, let's see the data that we were given. So we were given two tables, one is users and other is transactions. So if we look at this users table, then it contained column like user ID, username and then credit limit. So it represents users which are users of some kind of account or maybe card which has a credit limit. And credit limit, for example, Peter has credit limit of 100, Roger has credit limit of 200. So if a user spends more than this amount, then they might fine it or something like that, right? This is the credit limit that is given. Now, if you look at the other table, that is transactions, then what do we have there? We have transaction ID, paid by, paid to, amount, and then transaction date. So in this, each row represents the amount paid by user 1 to the second user and on what particular date it was paid. So this paid by represents the user who paid the amount and to whom the payment was done, represented by paid to column. Right. Now let's see what the question is saying. So the question says, write a query to find the credit left and tag users if total transactions has breached the credit limit. Output column should contain user ID, username, credit left, breached credit limit, which is a flag basically 1 or 0. So we have to figure out whether the user has breached the credit limit or not and what is the credit left with the user. So if we look at the output that we need, we can get the user ID from the users table, we can get the username from the users table, and then we can get the credit left by using this transactions table, and then we can check whether the credit limit is breached or not, again based on the credit left, right? So let us talk first about this credit left thing, and let's see how we can calculate the credit left. So credit left can be calculated like whatever credit limit was there with the user, that minus whatever the net spent that user did. For example, if we look at user 1, then user 1 paid to user 3 400 amount. This is the amount that user 1 spent. And if we look at user 1 again over here, this user received some amount, that is 200 from user 2. So if we look at the net spend that user 1 did, we can say is 400 minus 200, that is 200. So net spent in this case is nothing but we can say the amount that the user spent minus amount the user received. So if we can find the amount spent and amount received for each user and this credit limit, then we can find the credit left. Now credit limit is something that again we can get from the users table, and then amount spent we can get from this transactions table, and amount received also we can get from the transactions table, right? So this means that we have to join this users and transactions table, because some fields we will get from transactions and some fields we will get from users table. So definitely we have to join these two tables, right? So now let's see one by one how we can achieve, how we can get basically each of these columns so that we can finally arrive at our credit left. And once we have the credit left, then we can easily check whether if the credit limit was breached or not. Because if credit left is positive or 0 or positive, then we can say it is not breached. But if the credit left is negative, then we will say that the credit limit has been breached, right? Okay, so now let's get started. So let us quickly join the two tables, then we will talk about how to achieve or get each of the columns here. So we will do select from what, select from users, and let's give it an alias u, and then let's do left join with what, transactions table, transactions, and transactions, let's give it as transaction as the alias. And on what basis do we join? Yeah, the question arises, on what basis do we join? So if we look carefully, to calculate credit left, we need amount spent from this transactions table and also amount received. Now, if we join the users table based on paid by column, so from user ID, from the users table, we will get the user ID. And if we use this paid by column, which is contains the user ID, then in that case, the amount that we will receive, it will be nothing but the amount spent. because the user has paid someone, right? So if we use this particular column, paid by column, to join with user, then the amount column will represent the amount spent. But if we join this particular transactions table based on paid to column, then the amount that is present in this column will represent the amount received by that user, right? So I'll just write this query, and then you will understand it better. So we will do left join transactions table, and we have named it as trans on what, on, we can say, trans dot paid by equals to u dot user id. Now let me get the columns. Let's get the column user underscore ID, and let's get the user name as well, and let's get the amount column as well. The user ID we are getting from u, so u dot, let's call it u dot, and amount we are getting from what table? Trans table, trans dot amount. And in this case we have joined based on paid by, right? So this amount is nothing but, we can say, as amount spent. We can call it as amount spent. So if I run this query, for what it should give, it should give me the all the users and the amount spent, and who all has spent here? User 1, 3 and 2. So 1, 3 and 2. For 1 we should get 400, for 3 we should get 500, and for user 2 we should get 200, right? So let me run this query and let's see what is the amount spent first. So yeah, Peter, which is user 1, 400, 2, 200, and user 3, we are getting 500, right? And user 4 is also there, who has not spent anything, so we are getting null. So we have got the amount spent, but we also need what? We need another column for amount received, and we need credit limit as well. So credit limit, anyways, we can directly get from users table. We'll add that credit limit here as well, u dot credit limit, and this should be fine. We have got the credit limit. Now how to get the amount received? So for that, let me again run this select star from transactions. Now here we join based on paid by. We join based on paid by column. Now if we join the users tables with transactions table based on paid to, then definitely all these users will be, this amount column for all these users will be nothing but the amount received. So let us join this users table with transactions table once again. So we will join again, left join what? We'll join transactions table, and let's call it as trans maybe pt. Let's, because we are going to use paid to column here, so I'm calling it pt. So maybe let's call this as paid pb, trans pb. So we will use here also trans pb. I'll update it to trans pb, trans pt. So now we are going to use paid to column. So we will say on trans pt dot paid underscore to, right? Trans, yeah, trans pt. This should be fine, and join with u dot user id, right? And this should become trans pb. Now what we have done here, we have joined based on paid to column. So now if I get the amount column from this trans pt table, then the amount should represent that users received amount, right? So I'll add that as well here. We will say trans pt dot amount as amount received, right? This should represent the amount received. So trans pp, this has to be fixed, trans pp. Yeah. So now if we run this query, then we should have the credit limit, amount spent, amount received in our output. Yeah, so we can see that Peter has a credit limit of 100, amount Peter spent was 400, amount received was 200. Now what we have to do, we have to find the credit left, which we can simply find by using this arithmetic operation which we described here, credit limit minus the net of amount spent minus amount received. And once we have this credit left, then we can easily get this particular flag whether the credit limit was breached or not, right? So now let's quickly do this arithmetic operation. So what we can do is we don't need these two columns in the output. What we need is credit left. So what we will do, we will subtract, we will use that above arithmetic operation. So I'll just remove this comma, I'll do this, I'll bring this over here. So what we have to do, we have to keep this in bracket and we have to keep this also in bracket. So I'll just put the braces here, sorry, brackets here. So, and we don't need to name it now as amount received or amount spent. I just wrote it to show you that this represents amount spent and amount received. So now we have this above arithmetic operation that we used here, that is credit limit minus amount spent. This is amount spent and this is amount received. So now this particular operation will give me what? This particular operation will give us the credit left. Credit left. Right. However, we have to be very careful here because we are doing subtraction over the amount columns, and we see that John has this nulls in both cases. So because we're subtracting credit limit from this null in this case, for John it will be null. So this entire credit left will be null. So we have to ensure that these values are not null, but they are zero here instead of null. We will have to put these in police as well. So we will use the police function in SQL to say that if this is null, then return 0. So I'll show you how it works. I'll write police this comma 0. What it will do is it will see this particular variable, and if it is null, it will return 0. The police will return 0. Similarly, they will do is this transaction amount comma 0. So this will also return 0 if this particular value is null. So you understand this why it is necessary here, because we are doing 800 minus null, and in SQL, what if you subtract null from something, it will become null. So in this particular case, John should have 800 as the credit left and not null, right? That's why we have to do this police, so that this particular value is a 0 and not a null, right? So this is an important step which should in practical scenarios you should always consider. So yeah, now we have the credit left here. Now what we have to check for, we have to just simply check whether this particular value is greater than equal to 0 or not. If it is greater than equal to 0, this credit left, then we will say the limit is not breached, else it is breached. So here we will have to add another column which we will call as breached credit limit. So we will call it as breached credit limit. So this column, how will we get this column? So here again, another important concept we have to use case when statement. So we have to, why we have to use case when, because we have to check whether this particular condition is met or not. If it is met, then we will say okay, this is not breached or breached. So let's write that particular case when statement here. So we'll say case when this particular thing, let's copy it as it is, this particular arithmetic operation is what, if it is greater than 0, then we say, then I'll explain this down. So if it is greater than 0, so we have put a condition of greater than 0, then we say it is 0, it is not breached, else we say 1, and we will end it as breached credit limit, right? So if it is greater than 0, it will say 0. If it is not, then it will say 1. So greater than equal to, we should also put here greater than equal to, right? So now, and let's put a comma here after credit limit so that it's fine. Yeah. So now we have all our columns. We have the user ID, we have the user name, we have this particular column which is basically credit left, and this case when statement will help us identify whether the credit limit was breached or not. So now I'll just run this query. Let's see what output do we get. So we see here that Peter is the only user who whose credit left is negative, and that's why it is tagged as 1. All other users credit left is positive, so they did not breach the credit limit. So if you look at this entire question, it had use of multiple concepts. One is Collier statement, then we also used case when statement here to identify the credit limit was breached or not, and then this has multiple joins as well. So I hope this was very helpful for you. Thank you so much for watching. Bye bye.